Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Namaste viewers, welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA. Today's show is about Kashmir Files and the Hindu Awakening. This show is live also on Jaipur Dialogue India, and for the first time, we have greatest of pleasures in announcing that this show is sponsored by Mr. Arish Sahniji, who is a very prominent Hindu community activist in New York, and he cares a lot for Hindu causes. So thank you, Arishi, for sponsoring the show today. Going forward, wanted to also request all the viewers to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. And we need your support. We want your support, and support us all the way. So with these words, I wanted to shoot off. Kashmir Files, the movie, has been has created a real buzz. We often hear in the movie industry the buzz. But this movie has created a real buzz for the reason that though it is called a movie, it is based on true stories. Then that the movie has been talked about, written up, very glowing tributes have been paid by people who have seen the movie. And was part of Clubhouse yesterday. And it was fascinating to see that there was one particular room that ran for over 12 hours non-stop. People were coming in and going out. Young men and women like Nikunj and Pushpita and myself, also if I may include myself as young, which I am, they have gone with their children, 11 years, 13 years, 14 years. And what was most important for me to know is that the parents were saying that our kids must know the truth. The truth was the biggest casualty of the Kashmir saga, the unfortunate thing that happened. So diving straight into the whole show, and this was one thing, the other backdrop of this one is, which is where I will seek Nikunj and Pushpita ji to talk about more, is that, you are aware of this, Nikunj, we were part of the Zoom conversation with New York State senators and assemblymen when we were discussing about the attack on our symbol of swastika. That was a time when a lot of people were saying they didn't even know what swastika is all about. And that was one element that brought us together, cutting across cross-section of the Indian community here. And people were complaining, we Hindus are not united. Everybody was talking about that. That's what triggered my thought, that we must talk about it. There are always a cause and an issue that brings people together. So going forward, tell us if you have seen the movie. I hope you have. Tell us, how did it impact you? And do you think this will create an awakening and unity amongst all Hindus for all the suffering that was brought upon us unfairly, wrongfully, and deliberately? Nikunji, you go first.
Namaste. Pleasure to be here, as always. Thank you, Vibhuti ji, and thank you for Jaipur Dialogues for hosting us here today. I think the topic is really important. What I would say is this idea. So I was about, I gotta say, like 12 years old or something like that, maybe 11 or 12, when the whole Kashmir issue happened, and we had no idea, right? In India, growing up in India, I grew up in India, but I came here when I was young. I don't remember even one little thing. Maybe in Doordarshan or something, you saw like a little news flash saying this is happening, and then security forces being shown and things like that. But nothing else happened after that, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, even after, right, with the advent of internet and things that were coming after in the 90s, you still did not hear anything, right? And which is a shame because of what this movie, and it's not about the movie, and I'll come to that in a second. But fast forward, even now, I would say in 2019, when we tried to host Vivek Agnihotri at Rutgers University, there was a huge backlash, and we were essentially forced out of the university to host an event outside. And even at the event, a few individuals made ruckus, and they blamed the Hindus for doing, being extremists and things like that. So it was essentially like a setup for failure for the community in a way. So that kind of jaded us, and that's one of the reasons why we had actually started Kona back in 2020. So you can see like these stories, as Hindus bring out their stories of trauma, things like that, they are being silenced and gaslit. And essentially trying to say that, hey, it was not a big deal, only a few people died. Oh, by the way, the Kashmiris actually left the valley. They were not forced out of the valley. One of the senior, I would say, lawmaker here in the U.S., Brad Sherman, in a hearing, he had mentioned that the Kashmiri Pandits left the valley. They did not leave the valley. They were thrown out. They were forced out. They were, literally murdered to get out of the valley. They did not just leave the valley. Nobody just leaves your home voluntarily, right? And if you remember, Vibhuti ji, we had done that about a couple of years ago before the pandemic. We had done a Indian Americans for Kashmir forum where we had the same theme at TV Asia. So you can see now what's really happening is people are really coming up to speed and understanding that this is important. And we'll talk about the ecosystem and the awakening a little bit later. But so for me, Kashmir Files is not about the movie. It's about the story. It's about bringing out the trauma, the tragedy that happened. And like you said, truth was the biggest victim here, that the truth has been suppressed so far. And now things are coming back. So I'm really happy that this movie came out and is making the wave. I've talked to the a lot of the community members here in the Hindu community and beyond, and the shows, the movie times and theaters have been full. No one's like, some people can't even get in because they're like, oh, we want to see more and more of these shows. But unfortunately, I think there's a first, I think by next week is the last show. So I encourage everybody to go there, look at it. Even though it's a movie, like you said, it tells the story. And the way people have enacted in there, it really brings out some very powerful messages and reflection. It's an important thing for the Hindu community globally to reflect that through this movie, what can happen to a community and how the larger community is completely oblivious. If you look at, and again, I don't like to make comparisons, but it's an important illustration. If you look at what has happened with Holocaust, right? The idea is even people in the community did not know about the Holocaust, but the Jewish community made sure over the years that people understand that this is something that happened to their community. And now everybody knows about the Holocaust, right? It's taught in schools, it's taught in many different places. Of course, there are still people who deny the Holocaust, which is a shame, but that's how it's going to be, right? So we have to tell our story. So the Kashmir Files, I look at it as the first big attempt to really tell a story about what happened to the Hindus in the right way. And Vivek ji has done a fantastic job. Vivek Agnihotri ji has a fantastic job in this movie, along with all the veteran actors and actresses that are in the movie. So I'll stop here. I'll give it to maybe Pushpita ji or yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent opening statement on this issue. Pushpita ji, welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue for the first ever time. And you are welcome. And thank you very much. You are part of KONA. And for the purpose of viewers, those who may not remember or know KONA, it is called Coalition of Hindus of North America. And that's a very important organization. I think you are a pretty new one, right?
Yeah.
If I may say
less than 2 years.
Yeah, less than 2 years. And I think it started after we were together on the Indian Americans for Kashmir forum that you and I did the show there, So that was a very successful one. And, I'm very sure that mobilization of Indians will happen. Pushpita ji, I will ask you a very simple question. Did you see the movie?
I have my tickets booked to see tomorrow.
All right.
Weekend was given to soccer. So
okay, that's perfectly fine. I wanted to say that particularly because some of the people reached out to me, young ladies, said that it is so heart-wrenching and it's so hriday vidarak, as the Hindi ka shabd hai, that it is difficult we can't even contemplate going for the movie. And I suggested to her, please go and see it. Let the image, let the impression be your own instead of listening to others or reading something. So unless and until you feel the pain yourself, you will not experience the pain. It's a very important thing to do that. And I'm very happy to say that young lady said, I'm going to go for the movie for that now.
Yeah.
So you will see the movie tomorrow, and I'm very happy you will. Point which is very important to know is what Nikunj also mentioned earlier on, is that this was genocide and exodus from Kashmir. Nobody left on his own voluntary choice. And, so they were given a threat, leave, convert, or die.
Mm-hmm.
How can the media twist the whole thing as if Kashmiri Pandits left because they were not getting along with their local Muslim people? Where does the real rub lie? Where does the real problem lie? I want you to address that part.
Yeah, I think you got to the crux of the issue. I think people sort of, as they discover this, they think this is a new issue, but actually this twisting of the narrative is pretty old. It's as old as the Exodus itself. So I have always been a bit of a political junkie. So I did read some of the articles, over the years. I've read Jagmohan's book, My Frozen Turbulence, which he wrote, and I've read Rahul Panditaji's book, which he wrote a few years ago. So I think what this movie does so importantly is to mainstream it, because otherwise, what was happening was the story of Kashmir was limited to those of who were directly impacted and were trying on an individual basis to get their very painful stories heard, or very limited people who have an interest or in history or news media. And I do come from a news background. I've been trained in journalism twice, and I've been working in the comms industry. So I always tell people that we are not fighting ignorance. To a large extent, we are up against a strategic attempt to completely silence us and deplatform us. So yes, there are people who are ignorant, and the more we speak up, the more we will be heard. But when people say, how did I not hear? How did I not know? Don't be surprised. You haven't heard and you haven't known, because that is the intent. There has been a deliberate attempt to silence our voices, and it's not new. So I think that is something very important, because this information was out there. People have written books, there have been articles, that people have been talking. At Kona itself, it's interesting, Nikunj brought it up, but from the very inception, we have been focusing on Kashmir. When the 1 year anniversary of the abrogation of 370 happened, we actually had a conference, virtual conference, where Vivek Agnihotri ji spoke among other speakers, and he actually talked about the making of this movie back in August 2020, and we just posted a small clip of that, which I'd love people to go and see. And then in January 2021, we hosted a panel with 5 Kashmiri women who were, different. One was like 5 years old, one was a teenager, one was in her 20s, and they were like direct victims of this, and their stories were so heartrending. We were all crying when we did that panel. Um, and that one story really stuck with me. That lady was in college. I think she was doing her medical when this thing happened. So she had to leave Kashmir, and at some point she got admission in Indore or Baroda, one of the two states. And it was a friendly state, a BJP ruled state. So that's why they got admission. She said nobody knew our story even back then. So there was resentment among the other medical students that, who are these people? They've suddenly shown up and taken, medical seats are a prized thing. So we're like, who are these people who have suddenly shown up in college? And she said, had people known our story, the other students, the teachers, the community would have been more sympathetic and supported us. But even back then, their stories were suppressed. So I think people need to realize what we are up against.
I totally agree with you. And as you said, that the entire foundation of the movie is based on truth. So when I was watching the movie, I was perhaps the first few of the 300, 400 people who saw the first screening in New York, in Long Island. It was heart wrenching. It was angering. My blood was boiling, because I was so happy at the same time that for once people will see the reality on the screen. It's not a fiction. You will notice something very interesting tomorrow, Pushpitaji. As you see you will see Professor Menon, the fabulous lady who was championing the cause of, anti-India, anti-Hindu, the entire narrative, the way she was talking about. Sometimes you feel that was an emotional mumbo jumbo. I urge every viewer here to look up the actual speech, which was 7 minutes or so of YouTube. It's there on YouTube. Professor Menon talking to the actual students in the same theatrical setting. Your blood will boil, because what Vivekji did through his wonderful wife Pallaviji did a fabulous show characterization of her role. That somebody becomes successful or unsuccessful because when you begin to dislike that that persona, that means the actor did a good job, and Pallaviji did a fabulous job. That speech you will watch, Pushpitaji, tomorrow. That is real. I just watched it. One of my professor friends shared that. with a notation. Look at that speech. It is almost verbatim of what Vivekji said in the film. On the other hand, it is Vivekji has said verbatim what happened in real life. So you are going to see reality depicted there. Brings us to the next point of conversation here: the media role, the organizational support. Where was it? Nikunji, I'm coming to you with this request. Where was it? Why was it that the Congress party in India was such a sellout to the anti-Pandit agenda in Kashmir? What happened there? What was the trigger for them to be totally, anti-Hindu? So much so that I am angry that Nehru and Indira Gandhi, they were Pandits of that place. And they were misleading their own people. Where was the shame? Where was the problem? What was the issue there?
Again, I'm not an expert, obviously, on those geopolitics, but at the same time, what has happened is, see, the Congress Party was the ruling party, the establishment, right, for the longest time. And one of the things that happened was they had allies in Kashmir, and they did not want to trigger or piss off a certain group of people, and therefore they just kind of set and dismissed it completely, right? And even though Nehruji was himself a Pandit and should have been at the forefront, right, because of his own heritage, unfortunately was completely like silenced or just ignored in that sense. And what's really important is while we had I think while we had other ruling parties at the time, there should, given their national profile, they should have done more, right? But unfortunately, they didn't, because there was an establishment connection between the some of the elements in the valley as well as the Congress Party, right? And again, I'm not an expert at that, but from what I have heard and what I've read, this is one of the reasons why they completely they did not take this issue at a national stage, because they were concerned that they would trigger a certain community or a certain group of people, etc., which is very unfortunate, right? If this happened in other parts of the world, if you are from that community, you would take up the cause. I mean, I'll give you an example. Look at the Armenian community, right? If you look at the Armenian political policymakers in America, right, they are at the forefront of of advocating for the Armenian community. Of course, in Armenia, there are politicians, but look at the diaspora. The Armenian diaspora has been very, very active to that. But unfortunately for us, at that time, the problem is we always look to say, oh, who's going to do this? Somebody else is doing it. But I think our community as a group, so let's say Nehru or Indiraji did not do any of that stuff. They did not do our work. But where was the global community? Where was the Hindu community who should have stood up and done something? And you had mentioned earlier something that, people say, why wasn't I aware of? Because people don't read. People are busy with their own little worlds, whether it's like taking the kids to work, to school, or, going to Bollywood movies or Chai Pe Charcha or other things. People just don't bother. And then when all of a sudden some gyan comes up, some knowledge dawns upon them that, oh my God, I never knew about this. I need to do something about it. It's a good thing. But then the problem is that it's not like you can't just dismiss it and say, oh, why wasn't it done before? Well, you were not around, or other people were not around. And the political establishment also did not do its job that it was supposed to do. And that's why the story of Kashmiri Pandits, Kashmiri Hindus is so critical through the movie and through the awakening that is now happening.
Thank you. Pushpita ji, you said that you are from the media, right? You have
I'm trained as a journalist, but not, yeah.
No, you're trained as a journalist. Okay, I'm not trained as a journalist. So I'm the accidental tourist in the world of journalism. So, one of the things that, always picks my mind is, how is it that we as Hindus have never been united? You are very young. You are part of this American diaspora. Why do you think this generation of Indians here are not together to take Nikunj's statement? Everybody is worried about his own little world. Why aren't we so nationalistic, committed to our country, like Armenians are, like Muslims are? They are committed to their cause. You got to admire that. They are committed to their cause. Why are we not committed to our cause? Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's a very big question. I actually grew up in India too. I moved here just like many of us to do my master's and then studies and then work. So I think that's the very big question. I'm going to try and piece it apart. So there are many different things that that are civilizationally different about us, and like everything, there's the good part of it, and then there's the cons of it. So something that's a pro also becomes a con in a different setting. So what I love about why I am an advocate for the Hindu faith, what I love about it is its liberalism. It's true liberalism. What the word genuinely means, not the political ideology that has come to define it. And it's the support it provides to varying diverse perspectives while providing a solid value-based ecosystem. But that kind of ecosystem framework kind of support also means that each of us thinks differently, which makes it very hard for us to, and I'm no expert, so please take my words with a pinch of salt, but there are much more people with better pedigrees and experts to talk about this. But my personal take is that is our strength, but that is also our weakness when it comes to uniting around one message, one cause, because we are all experts and we are not trained to look upon the equivalent of a pope or a bishop, or we are not a flock, so we don't come and listen to one person every week, whether that so and that's a good point, but that's also that can go and hurt us in some other ways. So that's my take on it.
The other thing which I wanted to ask the audience here, that please ask the questions. You are most welcome to ask the question, particularly of the two young people who are here, of how the Indian diaspora in America is dealing with this situation, and how we are also like you. We feel the pain. Just because somebody is in India, somebody is in America, doesn't mean that we are delinked. We are connected with our roots, with our history, our culture, and our tradition. So the pain that if something goes wrong in India, we feel the pain too, just as you would feel the pain if something happens to Indians here. So my question to you, Nikunj, is that you formed Kohna, and it's a beautiful name, Coalition of Hindus of North America. Stepping on to the next level of conversation, what do you think ails the Hindu community? And I'll be specific about, unabashedly about the Hindu community, because Indians are Indians. It makes up of plethora of various belief systems. I'm especially talking about the Hindus. Why
Right.
are we so disparately divided?
Yeah.
And you, since you formed the coalition, share your experience on that.
Yeah, so there are multiple things. First of all, Hindus are in 100 countries around the world. So that's why we don't call ourselves Coalition of Indians in North America. We're calling ourselves Coalition of Hindus of North America, because we have people who are not just Indian, right? Some of them, people are born and raised here as well. So while we obviously understand the connections to India, if you talk to the younger generation, they don't have such a strong connection. And that's a different conversation to be had. But they do connect with their Hindu roots, right, in different ways. Then you have the Caribbean Hindus, you have the white Hindus, the black Hindus, Spanish Hindus, right? All these different types of Hindus from all over different parts of the world. So we want to welcome them under the Hindu identity in that sense. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you asked the question, what is wrong with us, right? In that sense, and that's we can talk about that for like several hours. But one, I would break it down in a few things. Number one, as Pushpita ji said, we have various different systems within the Hindu tradition, which is a good thing, because there's a less pluralistic approach to things. But the problem with that is that sometimes egos do come in, and it's like my way or the highway, or okay, I'm better than you, within the community, not outside. The second thing is a lack of a sense of history. Many people who come from the Hindu background have been born and raised in India, right? 95% or more Hindus live in India. So a lot of the people who are outside. And when they were growing up in India, they learned very, very little things about Hindu history, about the true identity of the civilization for many years. You learned like, oh, some white people came from outside. They were called Aryans. They subjugated the darker skinned people called Dravidians, and they were driven down south. That's why people in south look darker. People in lower, some like ridiculous narratives like that. And then you talk about a few temple empires, and then you fast forward to the British or to the Mughals, etc. And then comes to the Indian independence, and then boom, today in the world. But an entire plethora of civilizational values. I give a presentation called Contributions of Hindus to Human Civilization. And every single time I give that presentation, people are just shocked to hear that this is the type of stuff that we had. And I'm like, yeah, This is just the tip of the iceberg. So first of all, we don't have a sense of civilizational history, and it's changing, no doubt, with the advent of Jaipur Dialogue USA and many other forums. But still, there's a collective sense of history is lacking. And because that's lacking, what ends up happening, we don't understand the pain that our ancestors have gone through to sustain ourselves, right? The sacrifices that they made, blood, sweat, and tears. And therefore, once you don't see that pain, you don't feel for your community in that sense. If you look at other communities, I gave the example of Armenians, I gave the example of Jews, I'll give you an example of Sikhs, right? I'll give you an example of so many communities who actually keep that history alive in many different ways. Their struggles, their collective stories, their trauma, etc. And Hindus have gone through a lot of trauma, not just recent with Kashmir or Bangladesh, but if you go back hundreds of years and thousands of years, or at least 1,000+ years, you can see the trauma that is being played out in many different ways, right? So you can see that, but our sense of history is missing. The third thing is because we have a tradition that believes in sort of connecting with the individual, okay? The sort of aham brahmasmi, right? I am the self in that sense, and with that pursuit of self-realization, we lack the communal realization. That we don't look at ourselves as an organization, as an entity, as a body of people who come from the same shared values. We have this idea. I look at the Hindu community as a big umbrella, right? We all need to be under the umbrella in the sense that we can get shelter. But what ends up happening is that we don't realize it that way, and everyone's looking at themselves individually. So the sense of collective communal identity is missing. And that's what that becomes the biggest impediment. So you talked about the swastika campaign. There is an issue going on about caste in the United States, where policies are being passed in universities that blame the Hindu tradition for caste-based discrimination. And of course, there are social discriminations in societies, but there's no real pushback. Some people even internalize that, saying, "Oh, no, I'm pretty sure Hinduism has caste-based discrimination and things like that," right? It's not. I distinguish between Hindu dharma, which is the religion and the tradition, versus people. People can discriminate, but to dismantle and destroy an entire religion and say this religion discriminates and therefore it must be eliminated, there's no serious challenge. There are pockets like organizations like Kona and many others who are working on these things do provide the challenge. But if this happened to another community or communities, right, there will be massive backlash, massive challenge, because we have internalized this type of sort of negationism, hatred, whatever you want to call it, about us because of what we have been taught. You talked about Kashmir earlier. I'll give you an example. At Rutgers University, if you look at the syllabus of South Asian history by a certain professor, you can see, if you look at the section on Kashmir, there is really a complete whitewash and complete propaganda of what is taught about Kashmir. There is no discussion about Hinduism in Kashmir. There's no discussion about what happened to the Pandits. Instead, there's a whole whitewashing of what this tragedy was. So when you see the academic, push to negate our history, to negate our trauma, no wonder you find that. Whether it's in India, whether you're taught in the NCERT books or not taught in NCERT books, or in America in these religion departments or South Asian history departments that basically show that Hinduism is caste, cow, curry, and chaos. Okay, and that's why I think we have a problem. And the final point is that we are too busy trying to make a lot of money. That's not a bad thing to do. Don't get me wrong. Lakshmiji is important, but what we forget is that we have a certain privilege that we need to acknowledge and say we are here because of our collective ancestors. There's a whole idea of rina, which is debt. We owe a debt to our civilizational ancestors, to our rishis, to our ancestors, to our people who have sacrificed. That's why I am Nikunj Trivedi today and not something else. My identity is still a Hindu, and then I can sit here in America and think about what I can do. I can work on Wall Street, etc. Right? Somebody can be a Google CEO, or somebody can be a top shot venture capitalist in Silicon Valley because of the fact that their ancestors sacrificed. So we must give back and not forget. Yes, we need to make money, but at the same time, we need to collectively donate and collectively contribute to make sure that our civilization survives and thrives. Because Hindu dharma and dharmic civilization can provide the harmony that is needed in today's world that is full of conflict and traditional issues and things like that. because we do not say my way or the highway. We say that everyone's way in mutual respect can be appreciated. We may not agree together, but at least that's your way. And I'm not going to go and kill you, convert you, etc. I just want you to be you. And I want you to be me. I want me to be me without you trying to kill and convert me and throwing me out. And that is the greatest value that we need to preserve. Because today's world, if you look at what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, if you look at what's going on in other parts of the world, there's a lot of conflict. But dharma provides that antidote, that toolkit to make sure that the world is harmonious. And that's why our civilization needs to be preserved. It's not just for us, it's for the greater good of the entire world.
I think you're on mute.
I totally agree with you, and we have been on the same platform, same thought process. Is that our values are truly unique, and I have been on the speaking circle and interacting with the mainstream America, and they all talk about one thing. When I speak to them and share with them what our values are, they say, "Oh my God, why the hell don't you talk to us about it? Tell us more." And I said, "That's our failing. That's our failing, that we have not taken the message, because we believe you will learn. We don't welcome, when Hollywood stars embrace Hindu practices, we don't welcome with the same song and dance as others do. We have to change our orientation in this regard, that science and technology today is the biggest supporter of our values of Sanatan Dharma. It is not about the religion. The organized religions are driven by what is known as the fear and ignorance. Fear and ignorance drives the religious dogmas. You will go to heaven or hell. We don't have such concepts. We define it by karma, which is what I tell them. And I had this conversation with someone the other day when, you guys don't pray. I said, I don't have to. I have to do good to people. I have to do good for whatever it is. So, I gave the example that there is a person who prays to his respective God, goes and kills people, but I'm the one who rescues 5. Who is doing God's job at that point in time? Me, who has not gone to the temple today. So it is karma that defines you. That's very important. Pushpita ji, coming to you on this element, tell us about the success stories of Kona. How are you trying to bring people together under this coalition that you have built? Because this is a great name of the association group that you have formed. How are you growing, and how are you facing the storyline going forward with reference to uniting Hindus from all over the world?
A lot of people ask us, as Nikunj said, like when I went to India, they're like, well, why not Indians? I said, because they are Hindus who are not from India. And just 2 weeks ago, for example, we had a panel where we talked to 4 fabulous young ladies, Black Hindus, as they like to call themselves, something that even most of our own community are not that aware of. And they mentioned exactly what you were just talking about, that they found the faith. They each had very different journeys to finding Sanatan Dharma. But one of the things that we're talking about, like, why don't people tell us about this? We were having these offline discussions, and it was an interesting discussion. I said, yeah, we are pretty self-focused. We'll sit to ourselves, and if somebody comes seeking, if we have time, we'll talk to them, but we're not really out there telling about us. And so they had all these questions, and we had a fabulous conversation. But I was just thinking that in any other faith, there would have been like a whole army of people out to educate them, recruit them, get more of them. But for us, it's very much like, hey, we are here. Come find us and join us if you want. But we are not going to be out there. But I think that the flip side again of that is, we are living in an age where every community is expected, and every individual, every community, every group is expected to speak for itself and educate for itself. And speaking of what Kona does, that's exactly what we decided to do as Hindus, because we're like, okay, this is not something we do naturally. So let us take the step of forming together, coming together, because there are a lot of passionate individuals. And I think that's what Kona is great at, is we've found so many passionate individuals, knowledgeable individuals around the country, and we've sort of become a platform for people with very diverse backgrounds, very diverse viewpoints to come together and amplify that voice and that knowledge, because there's always power in numbers. So what you can do as yourself is you can, if you join with even 3 more like-minded people, you have an amplifier effect. And I think Kuna is a very, very good example of that. We've been we start in just as soon as we started out, we started hearing from parents who were hearing about some obnoxious stuff being taught in 6th and 7th grade right here in the US, whether it was North Carolina, whether it was Virginia. And so, again, an individual parent faced with some ridiculous stuff happening in their school, it's overwhelming. You don't know how to go up against your school. You don't have the knowledge in many cases, especially the knowledge delivered in a way that the school board or school authorities will accept. So an organization like Kona was able to come in and give them the entire material. And as long as that one parent was willing to go in and advocate further, we were behind them every step of the way, being part of the meetings, providing the content takes a lot of time, good researched content. So just having that confidence, having somebody who's been through the process. So now we are in discussions with 3 or 4 different school boards about correcting some really ridiculous stuff that was being taught to children as young as 6th or 7th grade. We've had a lot of success on we've had a lot of success on the swastika front, which I think you're aware of. Because again, when the discussion started, people were like, yeah, swastika, whatever. But most of us didn't even realize back in 2020, when Nikunj was doing his research and stuff, that the Hitler never called it the swastika. You just have this Nazi swastika, Hindu swastika. A lot of us had been making that distinction for years, saying, why are you targeting us with the swastika? Hitler never. But if he didn't even use the term, it begs the meaning is like, why did the swastika become the term used for it, right? If he called it the Hakenkreuz, which is the hooked cross, why the heck does the world call it the swastika? And there's so much to be thought about there. And it's very gratifying 2 years later, or few years later, to see that more and more people are now talking about this, because words matter. Words are very important. We cannot be dismissive and say, well, you can call it this or call it that. No, most of us would be pretty picky on, we are very respectful when it comes to calling other people by their right name, calling other rituals, practices, faiths by their right name. So we need to have that same discipline for us. And hey, if Hitler's Mein Kampf didn't call it the swastika, then why the heck are we calling it the swastika? Whether we say it's a Nazi swastika or the Hindu swastika, that's ridiculous. So I think that's one place where Kona has made a lot of difference. Hindu parent networking, again, giving parents an alternative to come together and find out what's happening in schools. There's a lot of ignorance in terms of people don't even realize. The general consensus is that I want my child to really focus on padhai likhai studies. They need to get the good grades, get the extracurricular. Maybe I'll teach them dharma when they are in college or they've got a job. But it's too late by then. A lot of your formative values and years are set in your elementary teen years, and trying to correct it after the fact doesn't work. And then, of course, the whole advocacy on caste, which we could probably talk about for 2 hours itself. But we run a lot of training. I forget the exact numbers. I don't know if Nikunji has them. But we've trained several hundred people now on how to accurately think about this word caste, this concept of caste, its history, its cultural roots, how it came to be the big thing it is today in the Indian subcontinent, and what it is for us as diasporic Indians living in the US, Canada, UK, and then does Hinduism actually sanction caste? Answer is a big no, but that would get us into a big discussion. Differentiating, as Nikunj said, between cultural practices and modern law in India and what the religion sanctions. We tend to mix up a lot of it, Hinduism, India, history. Oh, this crime happened in India. Hinduism is responsible. So there's a big lot of stuff to unpack. So those are some of the major initiatives. And I think we're very proud of what we've managed to accomplish in less than 2 years with a completely volunteer-run organization.
Yes, it is. And, I think, am I a member? Yes.
We hope
You
you
always
are.
are a member, even if you're not.
No, that's nice. I congratulate you for taking the initiative and establishing this, because we need to organize ourselves. We are highly unorganized. When I came to this country in 1991, and particularly when I had the responsibility to market India's liberalization program, many Indians believe that we are We are not supposed to market or sell something, It's not selling, it's propositioning. And that lesson came to me when I was in Delhi working with a major American bank there. I was very good at product structuring. And, success has many claimants. So, my boss called me one day, an American guy, and he said, "I believe you have done this." I said, "Yes, it's me." He said, "If you don't tell me that it was you, how would I know? Because there are many people who are claiming it, but I came to know it's you." The lesson of learning was, it's not about blowing your trumpet or dhol bajane wali baat hai. It is about letting the world know who you are. Otherwise, who has time for you? Why would anybody bother for you? And that's something that we must understand. And in my opinion, I think now that Kashmir Files, the movie, the story, is bringing Hindus together around the world. That this could have happened in my own country and I didn't know this. It's a remarkably unfortunate thing to happen. Brings me to the next point, Nikunj. Like I watched your conversation with Rajiv Malhotra ji in the session that you guys did. And he made a very poignant statement there that there are many organizations, we all get into fight with each other as to who is better and who is superior. And as a corporate, we work on turnaround strategies a lot. We always tell people, not everybody can be good at everything, right? There are some people who are good at something. Let them do that. And that's what Rajiv ji was talking about, that let everybody do their best. I may agree with you, I may not agree with you. That's perfectly fine. But I must not try to bring you down. I must not get into a fight that you can't do this, you must not do this, and the dreaded word shouldn't do this, that which paralyzes everybody. I believe in the world, in the thing that you are good at something, go ahead and run with the baton. It's a 400 by 400 relay race. And that's what we have to remember, that everybody must learn to participate. I don't agree with you, you go ahead and do what you want. I'm doing my own stuff. If I agree with you, let me support you. That's the mental shift that we all Hindus need to make, that we are not good at everything, and we can be good. Whatever we are good at, we must do. In the remaining few minutes, we have a few questions. Gentlemen, friends, ask your questions, and we will get back to the questions with the rest of after we have finished one more conversation with both of you. That question is uppermost in my mind. How do we unite? Because we can't be uniting if we are living in denial. And we have to recognize, this was 2 years ago that we talked about, are Hindus facing an existential threat? The thing is real. And my panelists had all opined that yes, we are facing existential threat, because Sanatan may live, Sanatan as principle may survive, but where? Particularly when the country is being balkanized in something that you referred to was democratic aspirations. Everybody has their own democratic aspiration. Can we break the country for that? We have to redefine. People are crying. The West is crying about 2 million refugees spilling over to European countries. But did the world have the same tears for Hindu refugees that came from Bangladesh in the numbers like 10 million? And that to a poor country. We were a poor country then. So we have to begin to bring those facts with full sympathy and concern for those who are suffering. Why are we fighting a war? Why there is a religious supremacy of one over the other? These are issues that we need to take forward. I'll give you, Nikunj, for shot at that. What do we need to do about that?
So I think you had mentioned earlier, I think what I would say, the ecosystem is changing. There are people who are making sure that people do unite. One of the things that has happened is the advent of social media. There's a lot of people like yourselves and others who have created these forums for people to come and talk about issues. So and then the WhatsApp universe, for all it's worth, sometimes there's negative things going on or fake news, whatever, but the information can spread pretty fast, right? Social media has really opened up what used to be a closed network of things. So that ecosystem is building. That's one thing. The second thing I think, as you had mentioned earlier, is that people need to understand and respect expertise. Okay, everybody wants to be a leader, but nobody wants to be a follower. Unfortunately, that is the case. And my litmus test has always been who to follow and who has the adhikara to lead. Right now, how do you determine that? You have to just see what is that has that person done over the past several years of their lives. Okay, have they spent their time strategically thinking about issues impacting Hindus? Have they spent time making a change and making an impact? Do they have a resume? Right, if that person has a resume, you go and follow that person. Okay, don't need to create new organizations or new things and new everybody wants to, like I said, what happens is somebody wakes up all of a sudden, they, whatever it's Kashmir or CAA or some issue, caste, whatever you want to call it, and all of a sudden they have this like dawning thing, oh, I must do something. And then they'll go and start an organization, or they'll go and start, or like try to do things on their own. First thing you have to do is understand, if you want to start an organization, that's totally fine. It requires a lot of effort, energy, continuous thinking, dealing with a lot of people, challenges ahead of you to start and maintain an organization. Okay, and I have a lot of experience in that because I've been involved in Hindu activism for the past 23 years, first through the Hindu Students Council and then through Kona. Right, it takes a lot of efforts. So people need to understand that let's divide our expertise in certain places. That okay, someone's good at something, let's let them do it. Let them do it. And if you can't do anything, I look at it this way. Okay, first of all, you go into the battlefield. If you want to go and do volunteer work, serious volunteer work. It's not chai pe charcha. Oh, I'll just forward a few things in WhatsApp. No, serious volunteer work is really needed. Number one, continuous also. Number two is if you can't do that, then donate money. Donate some serious money to the organizations that are actually doing the work, because we need support, right? We are all volunteer organization, but you got to make sure that you have some staff whose job is to do this full time. Other organizations, if you look at some of the big organizations, they literally have hundreds of millions of dollars and a volunteer staff of like 100, 200 people. I mean, a full-time staff of 100, 200 people, a volunteer base of like 1,000 people, etc. In comparison, I can challenge anyone out there to show me one Hindu organization within the North American sphere that has that. Doesn't exist, right? There might be some community organizations that may be existing, but in the scale of the other side. So we need to organize from that perspective by making sure that we focus on the expertise, if we focus on providing resources to the right organization so that they can make an impact, okay? And the third thing is, please read. Take some time on a regular basis to understand what is going on in the world, the Hindu world, that is. How are things impacting you? I know we are all busy trying to shuffle our kids to, football, soccer games, trying to have a social life a little bit, entertainment, etc. But we should not just have 100% of our time on that. Let's carve out some time, maybe 20% of a time, just like reading the news. You go through the news channels, read news about what's going on in the Hindu world and how you can contribute. The third thing I would say, focus on the future generation. Because a lot of the conversation that we had today was all about India, India, India. And this is a natural thing that happens to most of us born and raised in India. But the new generation that is over here, even to an extent in India, but over here, could care less. In fact, they're becoming anti-India in many ways. Because what is happening is when you don't teach your kids dharma, somebody else is going to teach them adharma. If you don't fill their heads with the right information, because they'll ask you questions, they learn stuff on Instagram, they learn stuff on social media, TikTok, etc. If you don't have those answers, somebody else is going to have the answers. And that somebody else doesn't have your family or your dharma's best interest in mind. So if you're not going to understand, if you're not going to awaken, if you're not going to read, if you're not going to understand the challenge, your kids are the direct targets of suffering. And I have numerous examples of parents and students who have come to me with these things, who I have had to deal with because they completely, in this Kashmiri Pandit thing, to give you an example, we tried to do events on campuses. A lot of Hindu kids, forget about other kids, a lot of Hindu kids themselves were in denial and said that this was a fascist propaganda, that the Kashmiri Pandits did not just like vanish, they just slowly left the valley. This is the narrative that is on campuses.
Yes, I'm aware of that. And Pushpita ji, time is coming to an end. We'll go to the questions as well. So you alluded to the Parents Teachers Association, and one of the things that I urge people, majority of them, that we, majority of us Indians who came here, they fell into the category of making a good life, what Nikunj said, making money. After all, nobody comes to America to remain poor. So they work hard to make money, to earn well and do well. And the earning money comes because we do well. That's another one very important element. The second part is we all have the tendency that we are like the Goras. We want to be like them. So as a result of which, मेरा बेटा अंग्रेजी बोलता है, ये हमारे लिए बहुत मजे की बात होती है. We feel very proud about it. In the process, we lose our own language structure. The third part is that because of this, the children are American born confused desis, the famous term. We Indians who came here, we were India born confused desis because we never learned about Hinduism back home. So we were got busy earning here. We didn't care. And our children became American born confused desis. On the process, we are all Hinos. We are all Hindus in name only. And suddenly, now that we have passed a certain threshold of our life, we see, oh my God, I'm losing my roots. My kids are being totally different, as you rightly said. They are in denial. They don't even know that they will not exist after some time based on all the attacks that are happening. So, Pushpita ji, the question that I'm asking is, why such a peaceful community like ours is a target of attack by everybody? The non-Hindu communities, why do they attack us? We are the most peaceful lot. We don't even attack anybody. We don't even bother anybody. We are pretty self-contained, but we are attacked. Why is it so?
I want to bring up human nature here. So most of us are a lot of us are from the corporate world, right? So think about it that way. If your job as you said you were in product marketing or product management, if you were up against a competitor, it doesn't matter that the competitor is not trying to get more market share. You're a growth organization. I'm going to use Silicon Valley terminology a little bit, right? So you're a growth organization. You want to grow, whether the person is competing against you or not. And then you want to, basically Silicon Valley is full of what we call disruptive technologies, right? So even if I'm not directly competing against you, even if my product or my thinking is coming in the way of whatever you are trying to sell or expand, you're going to see me as a competitor. And I think that's what we don't realize, that we are quite happy to sit in our shell and our world and just be happy if we can get our own kids onto our path. That would be success for us. But the rest of the world doesn't see us that way. They see us as you've all heard of the Joshua project, right? I'm sure. So the Joshua project, and Joshua project was created 20 years ago or more. Somebody has spent so much money and detail in going and mapping every little sub tribe and little group that exists in India. Most of us, even if you talk to a professional anthropologist in India, they probably don't have that much detail.
Right.
I'm sure the Sarkar doesn't have that much detail as Project Joshua has invested into mapping us down to the last little tiny subgroup. And they do that because they do see you as a target. So you can say, just leave me alone. And I kind of say it's ironic that my job as a Hindu activist is basically, please leave me alone and let me live my faith the way I want to. Whereas I'm up against activists whose job is to say, I need to take you over. So we can deny reality, but the better thing is to just accept that's the world we live in. And it's not so much the why as to realize, okay, this is happening to us. How do we fight back? How do we remain having a space for ourselves without fundamentally changing also who we are? I think that's the conundrum we face. Do we just become another Abrahamic religion to fight them off? Hopefully not. Hopefully we will find our own way of doing it. But I cannot stress the importance of doing this because perception is reality. I come from the comms business, and perception is reality. And if you are not giving the perception about your faith, your roots to your kids, guess what? Somebody else says, something else says, and that becomes reality for them, which you can't change. When you decide that the time is right, or you've retired now and you want to focus on this, it's too late. The ship has sailed.
I totally agree with you. My favorite statement is that if you don't define yourself, somebody else is.
Yeah.
That's important. So thank you both for a very fabulous conversation. I hope people have enjoyed it. Let's go to the questions, and then we will close the day today. Thank you very much. Nation first. Thank you. Huge respect for all Kashmiri Hindus who had to suffer a lot to leave their everything or die, but they didn't accept to convert or go against India. And shame on the then GOI in center and state government. Thank you very much for your very strong statement. Abhijit Sudhakar. Yes, Abhijit, we talked yesterday. Hello, Vijayji. Thank you for your time yesterday. I saw the movie. It was houseful. I only got front row seat, and at the end, it had standing ovation. I'm sure you did. And you were also the part of the guy who was giving the ovation. Thank you, Abhijit. Rajiv Mohan Bhatnagar. How can we have international solidarity on declaring jihad as a murderous encroachment into religious freedom of other faiths? Very tough question, very tricky question. Nikunj, I'll leave it to you.
Um, you know, I would say that has to
Keep
come
your
from
answers short because we have time things. So keep your answers short and crisp. You don't have to give a lecture on this.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
This
So
is a
the
very
idea
important topic, and that is something that we will talk about more, as a matter of fact, as we go forward. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. Any form of extremism needs to be denounced by all different forms of religion. But I think this type of activism has to come from the Muslim community itself. There are Muslim organizations who are working on weeding out the extremist elements from their traditions or from their own culture. So I think I would defer to that. The second thing is the Hindus or other communities that are minority communities around the world need to just talk about it and how such sort of forms of extremism have had an impact on their communities, whether it's in Kashmir Pandits, whether it's in Bangladesh, etc. The more we talk, the more we work with allies, the better it is.
Essentially, what we say, we have to get engaged in living abroad, that we do, because we encounter lots of these conversations, particularly if there is a snowfall or a nor'easter. It doesn't discriminate between religious suffering of people, right? It affects a Nikunj or a Joshua or a Muhammad, everybody equally, isn't it? A 16-inch nor'easter affects everybody. It doesn't make any distinction. Next question, Rajiv Mohan. Next, Santosh Mishraji. Thank you very much for your support. Much appreciate that. Be good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your support. Vijay Balebal. Very inspirational, as you say. Thank you. I appreciate that comment of yours and contribution. Chaitanya Burange. On the day of genocide, who was the PM? VP Singh, who was supporting that government, BJP, support their government, BJP. How you can blame Congress for genocide? Just one thing, you need to read some history. Nikunj mentioned to you earlier on. This was the seventh exodus, followed many genocides. So this was the seventh one. When it became intolerable, people left. Prior to VP Singh, it was a coalition government, no doubt. Mr. Vajpayee was part of the government, but Congress Party, go back and read the history, Chaitanyaji. Congress Party, Nehru, down the line, till that date, it will do you well to read that. And I would urge you to read Sanjay Dikshit's book, Unbreaking India. It's you have a lot of information there. So yes, you are good to ask the question, and but know the facts. Thank you. Next. Chetan R, thank you. Why aren't we able to do anything in Bengal, Assam, and Kerala? The existential threat for Hindus is real in those parts. What is the solution? It seems like this is planned very well. You want to take a shot at it? Though you are not in India, so I don't want to jump on your expertise, but common sense, which is rather uncommon. So try. Nikunj.
We need to do something. Why aren't we doing it? I think that's a question for Hindus of India. That why aren't people doing much? Where are the organizational infrastructure locally? That's number one. Number two is there are pockets of diasporic Hindus who are doing something. We know people within the US who are working on in Kerala Hindus. There's a group of Bengali Hindus who are working on it to try to talk about this at the US lawmakers level. So there are efforts going on, but I think Hindus in India need to drive this effort. It's going to be the biggest thing for India if Hindus in India can drive these efforts. We are a small community out here, a vocal one, but I think the local groundswell has to happen. It is happening, but it needs to be a bigger wave at this point.
And, a friend of mine from United Nations, a former Government of India senior official, he mentioned to me, and that was a very poignant statement which every Indian must bear in mind. His name is Rahul. I will not say his last name. He said to me, Muslims never forget their ultimate goal. Hindus forget what happened yesterday. And we've suddenly slipped into the Aman Ki Asha mode. Think about it. There is a very nice saying my Guruji told me, don't do both, forgive and forget. Do either or. Because if you do both, then you allow history to repeat itself. But if you do one, you improve the quality of your own life. But at the same time, you remain aware. And that's the awakening is essential for us. Either forgive or forget, don't do both. We Hindus do both, and then we slip into our lotus eating position. Thank you, all viewers. Please like the video, subscribe the channel, press the bell icon, and I really appreciate your support today. I just want to urge you one thing in the closing to all of you. Chapter 18, Bhagavad Gita, Shlok 14 and 15. You have the success formula given there by Bhagavan Krishna to Arjun. Read it, study it, analyze it. It's right out there. You don't have to go far. Thank you. As I always say, Satyamev Jayate. Nikunj and Pushpita ji, thank you very much for joining today.
Namaste. Thank you for having us.